Hello, CannaSphere family. It is a beautiful, glorious day in the city of Johannesburg. Wherever you are watching this, we hope you're having a beautiful day, evening, morning. We come to you every week on YouTube, as well as on CTV, on DSTV, channel 263, 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, 8:30 a.m. on a Thursday, and 7 p.m. on a Sunday. Can you believe that we get to talk about cannabis and weed on TV all the way across the African continent? Isn't that beautiful? We've got a lot coming up today's show. We've got Noxy coming up, who's going to be talking about, is sticky weed bad? Jeff is going to be talking about testing, which is super important in the cannabis industry. Dr. Gallo is talking about cannabis and multiple sclerosis. And Cuban Zulu is talking about trends in the cannabis industry. Lots coming up. What's happening in the headlines, Mr. Linda? Come.
Oh, sorry,
Tell us what the headlines
I'm such
are,
an old
please.
man. I haven't done this in a long time. Yeah, man. So today Brett's gonna talk about the presidency is saying that industrialization of medical cannabis is now officially South Africa's policy. Don't know if that's a good or bad thing. New African research project to study how illegal cannabis industry can become mainstream. And then the labor laws and cannabis legislation set to collide, which is not sounding like a very good thing. And then last but not least, Portugal is going to dominate European cannabis supply at Africa's expense.
That I'm not happy about, but we'll come to that in a minute. Goodbye. Go away. Thank you, Linda. Right now, let's cross straight up to Limpopo province, where we join the magnificent Brett Hilton-Barber with the news. Over to you, Brett.
Welcome to the CannaSphere TV news desk in Limpopo, with our overcast skies brooding over the Lowveld. The presidency believes the full legalization of adult use cannabis is, to put it in their words, an uncertain value proposition. And they believe there's more bang for our bucks by focusing on developing medicinal cannabis on an industrial scale. That's according to the country's new investment strategy, which has defined cannabis as number 4 of the big 5 investment frontiers. It's identified 4 sales channels, as it calls them, scaled by THC potency. High THC medical cannabis for export, high THC for non-medical adult use, low THC hemp for foodstuffs and building materials, and low THC biomass for animal foodstuffs. It says the Channel B, the so-called recreational market, has to undergo extensive legal and institutional evolution. But it says capabilities developed for medicinal production can very rapidly be deployed to service the recreational market, either locally or internationally. The new multi-country study of cannabis policy and history is being undertaken by global social research group MedSen International. It's studying Nigeria, Zimbabwe, and South Africa, with special emphasis on how to incorporate informal farmers into the mainstream. Here's Zimbabwe researcher Clemens Rusinga.
So I think the issue is smallholder producers and traders. They are also interested in making, in maximizing the value of the crop that they are producing. And for that to happen, it cannot happen by trying to force them to fit into a narrow framework which is highly technical and highly costly, which is very costly, and say, come and fit here. I think it's like giving a Ferrari car to a farmer, and you want them to make better use of that Ferrari car in a farm. The next that you will achieve is that you will find it having broken down.
The South African leg of the study is being conducted by Cape Town researcher Simon Howell. He says there's a lot to be learned from how the illegal market has put Africa on the world cannabis stage.
You know, one of the things about the sort of internationalization of cannabis, ironically, is, you know, if we think of examples of cannabis being exported from South Africa, one of the best examples from Southern Africa, one of the best examples is actually the illegal trade. And Swazi Gold, for instance, where, I mean, I'm sure many people in the UK have heard of Swazi Gold. And of course, while the way in which it's done may not be legal, I mean, you know, there are lessons to be learned there about how internationalization can be achieved and how it can impact on local farmers and local production and local livelihoods ultimately.
Labour laws and cannabis appear to be on a collision course, with a test case coming up before the Labour Appeals Court involving a former Barlow World Equipment employee who was dismissed after testing positive for cannabis at work. The Labour Court initially upheld the dismissal of Bernadette Inova, But now leave to appeal has been granted after counsel argued that she worked at capacity and in this story, South Africa is saying that the export of high-quality medicinal cannabis to Europe is the easiest way to make money out of legalization. Policymakers should pause for thought because in the dynamic world of cannabis, Portugal is likely to be the next major country in Europe to legalize. Prohibition Partners has said that Portugal has the capacity to supply all of Europe for the foreseeable future, and perhaps we should be looking closer to home and legalizing the commercial trade of cannabis in South Africa rather than depend on the hazy promise of easy riches in the export market. Back to you, Trenton.
You see, my opinion on this is that you need a local market without a doubt. If you can't trade locally, how is the industry going to grow? But our market is also limited. We have 55 million people. The buying power is not fantastic if you compare it to international developed economies. And the reality is we've been sending cannabis by the ton for decades and decades into European countries, and there's no reason why we shouldn't continue to do that through internationalization of cannabis, as the gentleman earlier mentioned. So I urgently think we need to focus a lot on getting those supply chains open into the European market, not neglecting what's happening at home, but if we set those supply chains up, I think they can be successful. The other thing is also in Portugal, I'm not sure of the propensity to grow indoor or outdoor, but I know that there was a big farm that's being built there at the moment, which is all indoor, which again, we can compete on price. So it will be interesting to know whether they're going outdoor or indoor and how long their cycle can be, because that will have an impact on whether they actually can take the whole European market or not.
And to add to your point, Trenton, what we should be doing in opening up the local market is focusing on our own genetics, see what our unique selling proposition from an African or South African cannabis perspective is, and then use that to market ourselves internationally and do what other countries can't. And so I'm with you, but we've got to be part of the global market, but we can't be our laurels.
No, we can't. Well, that's the problem, and we are losing that market traction every month at the moment while the legislators sit and take time to come up with things that will work for our country. Right, Brett, we'll see you a bit later. Thanks so much for that. Right now, we're going to cross over to Noxy, who's going to talk about, is sticky weed bad or good?
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the CannaSphere Lifestyle News Desk. Guys, I'm stressed. I'm stressed about people who get fired because they test positive for cannabis. If people are getting fired for testing positive for cannabis, I am number one in the queue. At some point in your cannabis journey, you either have or will come across some sticky weed. And I'm sure you've asked yourself, why is my weed sticky, or why is my weed dry and crumbly? Well, the secret lies in the trichomes, and the trichomes is a subject that the stickiest buds are well versed in. If you're a friend of the show, you'll know that trichomes are like the small hair-like growths on the plant that contain resin, which gives cannabis its power. So when you get a sticky bud, all it means is that there are many trichomes have formed on the flower, and they have a high resin content. Now, the higher the resin content means more terpenes and other cannabinoids. So why do people prefer sticky weed? Well, a resinous bud with crystals may have a better medical potential, a stronger high, and a better smell and taste than if it has a minimal resin. So if you happen to have a sticky bud lying around in your house, don't be afraid. It's nothing bad, guys. It's actually something quite good. Make sure you sit back, relax, take in all the gorgeous aromas and enjoy. Trenton, do you like sticky weed, or do you prefer your weed a little bit dry?
I love sticky weed. No, I like sticky weed. I just like it, yeah. I mean, obviously, I don't ever, on the odd occasion where I do actually smoke it, because, I'm a vape guy. Yes. If it's sticky, it doesn't always burn so well. But I do love the stickiness of those trichomes, and it smells obviously really nice from sticky weed. Are you a sticky weed girl?
I am, but on the contrary, I'm not a sticky weed girl because I enjoy smoking sticky weed. If I do choose to smoke, I'd rather have weed that's not very sticky. That's just a bit dry, but not like dry to the point of like crumbling to death. When I do get my hands on a sticky version of weed, the first thing I think I'm infusing it in some olive oil or some butter because I'm just like, whoa, can you imagine all of that, those cannabinoids in that baby and just consuming all of that goodness?
Oh, you're getting me all excited. It's not the end of the day, so let's move on. Noxy, thanks so much as always. We'll see you same time, same place next week. Right now we're crossing over to Jeff, who's going to talk about testing. Testing is a very, very crucial part of our industry and a problem. We don't have testing right, but Jeff's going to unpack that in a second. Over to you, Jeff.
In today's CannaSphere, we're going to have a quick 2-minute look at the different types of tests that can be done on cannabis. I hope you enjoy. Now, when it comes to testing cannabis, there's quite a few different formats you can test. You can test flower, but you can also test the entire range of what's extracted from the actual plant. Now, the first thing consumers are usually interested in is the actual potency. So how many cannabinoids are present in the material. THC or Delta-9 is often the main cannabinoid people are trying to look for. In addition, they might be looking at the acidic group. So that's THC-A, which is basically where it just has an extra CO2 carbon attached to the molecule. But these are the compounds they look for, the CBDs, the CBGs, the CBCs in the actual packaging or final flower form. In addition, they might be looking at the terpene profile. So terpenes are essentially the flavors. For instance, limonene, that typically smells like lemons. That also can be present on the actual cannabis flower. In addition, when you're doing extracts, one thing you might be looking for is actual residual solvents. So those are picked up using a device like a GCMS. In addition, we might be looking at moisture content, do some visual inspection to see that there are no pests present when we finally pack the cannabis in its final form. You might also be looking at things in terms of like potential environmental contaminants, whether that's heavy metals that might have pulled in from mine dumps into the soil and therefore into the plant, because cannabis is a great aggregated plant. If any pesticides are being used that aren't great, remember a lot of this has been inhalated when it's been smoked, so any presence of unnecessary pesticides is not great to get into your actual lung tissue. In addition, if there's any microorganisms that have really started to grow out of control, that's when we look to test for any kind of aflatoxins, which are basically toxins generated from microorganisms. And that brings us finally to, potentially harmful microorganisms, whether they're aerobic bacteria or they're yeasts and molds. It's okay to maybe have a few of these present, but there are certain microorganisms that we know are particularly dangerous, aspergillus, certain forms of Salmonella, E. coli, and that we want to limit in terms of presence in the sample. So we definitely want to test for that and make sure that you have a safe product. And with that, back to the studio to you, Trenton, for any questions on cannabis testing.
Thanks, Jeff. I think testing is such an important part, and we just don't seem to have got it right. I continually hear about people sending stuff to 3-4 different labs, and the results coming back, and they're all different. And I know that this is also was a problem. I don't know if they fixed it in the States, but 2-3 years ago, when I was visiting America, they had exactly the same problem. Are you finding that inconsistencies still exist in our markets?
Yeah, no, definitely. Until CANNAS, which is the regulation body that kind of regulates different tests between labs, until they figure that out, until they can send a sample, the same sample, to 4 different labs and get the same results, or at least within acceptable tolerance, it's going to persist. It will change, it will improve, but it's still the main thing to get sorted out at the moment.
And just in terms of consistency of testing across different labs, just explain what a monogram is and how that could potentially help.
Yeah, so essentially, look, there's also what's called a monograph as well, which is like a list of what tests should be done on a product that's going to a patient. So that needs to be defined often by the regulator. So there's been a debate about that. And then it's about using the same standards. Like one thing that does happen is if your reference standard, because you're always comparing it relative to something, especially on an HPLC, if that's an old standard, let's say you purchased it a year ago, it could have degraded, which means you're always comparing someone's new sample to an old standard. So those things are really important in terms of making sure using correct standards, the equipment's calibrated, and that there's enough testing so that the stuff can be maintained in a good standard.
Yeah, absolutely. Testing. It's completely must be done. I absolutely agree. Jeff, thanks for that as always. We'll see you next week. Have an awesome day. Ciao. Right now, I'm going to cross over to Dr. Gallo, who's going to talk about multiple sclerosis and cannabis.
Hi, good afternoon, CannaSphere viewers. Today I'm going to speak to you about multiple sclerosis and cannabis as a treatment. So what is MS? It is actually an inflammatory autoimmune degenerative disease of the central nervous system. The immune system basically malfunctions and it destroys your myelin. So your myelin is the fatty substance that coats and protects your nerve fibers in the brain and spinal cord. So these fat-based myelin sheets, they actually provide insulation and protection. But when we have lesions due to MS, your nerve impulses misfire across this broken insulation. This then causes many debilitating symptoms such as your muscular spasms, affecting your eyes, bladder, bowels, numbness, increased weakness, ataxia, slurred speech, and chronic pain. So interestingly, guys, the first ever licensed cannabis medicine was Sativex, also known as nabiximols, and this was for treating spasticity in MS patients. And the reason was it was found that these patients have intense neuropathic pain, and cannabis has been found to be effective, whereas opioids and your other non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs were actually not effective. So there's a large quantity of good quality evidence, including clinical trials with placebo controls, that demonstrate the efficacy and safety of cannabis in treating chronic pain. So I'm just going to go through some quotes of some published evidence quickly. In the Journal of Pain, the study adds to a growing body of evidence that cannabis may be effective at ameliorating neuropathic pain and may be an alternative for patients who do not respond to other drugs. In the Canadian Journal, our results support the claim that smoked cannabis reduces pain, improves mood, and helps sleep in MS patients. A study in Spain, inhibition of brain adhesion molecules may produce therapeutic effects in MS. A study in the University of Liverpool in the UK with 66 patients, they found cannabis-based medicine is effective in reducing pain and sleep disturbances in patients with MS-related central neuropathic pain, and is mostly well tolerated. So the publications show the evidence is there. The exciting part for patients is that suffering from MS is cannabis may be potent in alleviating these symptoms as discussed, but furthermore, the cannabinoids may actually slow the progression of the illness itself and thus provide an improvement to long-term survival and quality of life. So that's really exciting. Back to you, Trenton.
This is just so fascinating, to hear these stories. And the thing is, there are areas of industry that say that outside the industry, say there's not enough research, But there is a lot of research that's been done, especially in the States, to support these things. Am I right?
100%. I mean, I've quoted just 5-6 journals in like under 30 seconds. So there's so much more, and I've just taken snippets. So for MS, definitely, chronic pain, definitely, there is enough research and enough evidence. We just need to get it out there. We need the patients to have access to the medicines. That's what we need.
Completely. I mean, why do you think people will keep saying that there isn't enough research? Is that just because they're trying to keep it on the down low?
I guess so. And I guess with the stigma, they try to piggyback on that. The evidence is there. It's such a safe medicine. There's no addiction, no overdose. There's so much positive. So, there has to be an agenda. I don't understand why our patients don't have access to it. And that's what we need to push. And that's what we're doing at CannaSphere, which is exciting, educating patients to go to their doctors and say, hey, there's clinical evidence. There's enough here. And the patients themselves have those results, great results, So that's what's exciting.
Really? Yeah, the first medicine in the history of humankind that has been driven by us, the general populace, as opposed to being told that we need it by the pharmaceutical industry. There's a very interesting documentary series which I would recommend. You've probably seen already on Netflix at the moment, called How to Change Your Mind. It's all about different plant medicines and psychedelics and how they can help with all kinds of mind-blowing stuff. So the revolution is here, people. The revolution is here. The plant medicine revolution is here. It is not going anywhere. Thank you, Dr. Gallo. You have yourself a great day, and we'll see you soon. Yeah, so if you're into plant medicine or into exploring plant medicine, just jump online, watch documentaries. There's no excuse anymore. There really is a lot of information out there. Some of the things that we're actually able to achieve in terms of mental wellness and mental health are completely mind-blowing, with substances that are non-toxic and have been banned for many years because of the powers that be. Anyway, let's move over to something a little more different. We're going to talk about trends in the commercial cannabis industry from a grow perspective with the master of cannabis cultivation, Mr. Cuban Zulu. Over to you.
Hello, cannabis community. I'm Kwanda, aka the Cuban Zulu, coming to you live from CannaSphere's Grow Desk on a beautiful sunny day. So today I want to discuss the current trends we are seeing from commercial growers, and this continues to be a focus, sustainability and efficiency. So what we're seeing is an increase in water conservation, and this is done through the use of, specialized irrigation systems and a focus on crop steering, where you manipulate your environment, your feed, and so forth. And through this, they actually are managing to use less water. And then there's also an increase in the use of substrate, a cocoa peat and perlite mix. And then as well, we are seeing a lot of hybrid grows. Hybrid grows is a greenhouse where you're utilizing the power of the sun, and you're just basically coming in with low-level lighting to control your stage of growth. And finally, we are seeing a lot more cutting of operating costs and improving production efficiency. Thank you, and over to you, Trenton.
I love the term crop steering, because it's really quite a simple term, but it actually essentially is you're taking this grow room and you're steering it in this direction. It's very much like steering a car or taking a truck off-road. So I find that quite fascinating. What would you advise to people at home that have smaller grows? I mean, can you crop steer in a tent?
Yes, you definitely can crop steer in a tent. The only thing with the crop steering is your standard living soil, and standard cocoa peat in big pots is not so efficient because the water distribution just isn't as great. So you need to kind of go towards your pellet mix, your cocoa bricks that you see in a lot of commercial spaces, but you can utilize them at a home grow, just at a smaller scale.
Yeah, it's all about the approach, and it's a science. That's why we always say when you're starting to scale up cannabis, it's an art, because being with the plant and understanding how it works, and its botany is an art. And then there's the science, which is in terms of all the other inputs that need to come in. And when you're looking at scale, it's engineering, mechanics, and science all together. So very exciting.
Innovation.
Mr. Cuban Zulu, innovation, that is the word. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom as always. We'll see you next week. Have a great day. Out. Right, my compadres, the Kush Queen from Johannesburg and Mr. Brett Hilton-Barber, all the way from Limpopo. What do you have to say for yourself? Anything in the news that has sparked your interest that you would like to share or debate or argue or disagree with?
I need to argue and debate the cannabis testing at work thing. I feel that it's a violation of my rights.
Well, let's unpack that for a second. So, okay, I'm not a big fan of people consuming cannabis while they work. However, you could consume cannabis the evening before and come to work completely sober-minded, but it stays in your bloodstream for weeks. So then they test you, even though you're not high at work, and then they fire you. That is unacceptable. So I agree. Brett, I know you come to high to work every single day. Not, but do you get tested as you walk into your home office?
Yeah, my job is to turn cannabis into content. That's what I do. But you know what? I think there's a sinister side to this that's been happening in the Eastern Cape, where companies have been going, especially the automotive industry, and offering drug testing for only X amount, 2,500 Rand per employee, and finding people who've tested positive and then having disciplinary action against them. I think it's been halted to a certain extent by lawyers in the Eastern Cape, but that practice has been very, very prevalent. And it's very disturbing.
It is disturbing, and just for the viewers out there, especially those new to cannabis, we do not support consuming cannabis while working. There are some people that do it, and there are some people that are highly functional that can do it. Most people think they can do it and can't. That's one side. The other side is if you're doing a job that involves, machinery or anything to do with, using your hands, you should not be consuming cannabis at work. So we completely do not think that's a good idea. But if you've had cannabis the night before, the next day you're 100% fine, it's in your bloodstream because that's just the nature of the cannabis, then that should not be an issue. A friend of mine was actually crossing from the Dutch German border at one point, and he's a big cannabis smoker, but he hadn't had anything in like a day, and he got stopped, and he had a blood test by the police, and he had enough cannabis in his bloodstream that he actually got a fine. So these are all these crazy things that we're trying to figure out at the moment.
Yeah, definitely.
It is crazy.
Figure it out soon, hopefully.
We'll figure it out soon. Right. Thank you for joining us wherever you are. We've got viewers from across the African continent, so we're always excited to bring you the latest, sometimes not so greatest things happening in the cannabis industry. One thing is for sure, though, cannabis and hemp are going one way, and that is up. Higher and higher, further and further. Guys, have a great afternoon. We love you and leave you. Until next time, ciao.